Good afternoon from Charlotte, Montana. I'm Denver Holt with the Owl Research Institute. And on the other side of me here, who will be feeding me the questions, is Brooklyn Hunt, our 17-year-old student intern. And hopefully this will all go smooth. So I guess whenever you want to start asking questions, Brooklyn will read them to me.
How far will the great gray owlets disperse? What was learned with the cams that was new or unexpected?
How far will they disperse? I can't tell you that. At least right now, they're still hanging in the general neighborhood. I suppose, once the season kind of comes to an end and they're not dependent on the adults, then they'll disperse to new areas. How far they'll go, it's really hard to say. Even with the telemetry studies, the sample sizes are rather small to say anything with confidence. But they definitely will eventually venture out on their own, look for new territories, and yeah, and who knows? Hopefully, nest somewhere, within the region where we can find them and stuff like that. So, what was the other part of that question?
What was learned with the cams that was new or
What was
unexpected?
learned with the camps? What I think is so cool is just the behavior at the nest. I'm particularly interested in the female's behavior and these vocalizations that she gives when she's tending to the chicks. So that's kind of neat. You can also look at foraging rates. How often does the male come in, times that the males come in, how often does the female take a break. So all this stuff is recorded on camera, and a person could go back and pull that out and then quantify it. It's pretty interesting stuff. The cameras are neat in that respect, especially during the breeding season here. And then, of course, with the infrared, we can watch them at night, and you can see how much more is going on at night, and even sleep. You don't know. I guess you don't really know when they're sleeping and not sleeping. You make some assumptions based on looking at the eyes closed and all that. But how often do these female owls sleep, or how vigilant are they on the nest? So we learned quite a bit about the behavior at the nest, particularly of the female and the chicks.
What educational opportunities are available at the Owl Research Institute? Anything similar to the courses offered at the Yellowstone Institute?
Educational opportunities at the Owl Institute. Not similar to Yellowstone. No, we don't do a lot of courses like that. We teach an owl workshop a couple times a year in the spring, where we bring people in and we teach them how to locate owls, and we try to find a diversity of species. Up to, I think, 8 species is the most we've gotten before. So it's very specialized like that, but it's not real diverse in this educational component as something like the Yellowstone Institute. We have a lot of volunteers. In particular, we get student volunteers out of the University of Montana. Occasionally, we get interns that come in from out of state, but it's usually around here because we can test people and they can test us to see if it works out.
At the time banding was done on the great gray owls, I saw some chatter that testing had also been done to determine gender, but no formal announcement. Can you confirm or put this to rest? And if confirmed, what were the results?
Yeah, we didn't determine the sex of any of the young owls. Of course, we knew the male and the female based on their behaviors, etc. But as far as the young owls go, it's being determined, but it's not done now. So maybe we'll know the results here in the future, but we don't know as of today.
Were the number of viewers what you expected? Does the landowner watch the Great Gray Owl channel?
The number of viewers expected. I don't even know what the number of viewers were. So if it was anything like last year with all of the cameras, we're just overwhelmed. We think it's great, and the great gray owl's got a lot of attention because I don't know about all the owl nests in the world, but this is maybe it's the only great gray nest that's live 24/7 with infrared, or one of very few. So there's a lot going on with the great grays. And what was the other part of that question?
Did the landowner watch the
To
channel?
the landowner, yeah, they were very excited about it. Everybody over on the property was very excited about the great grays. They've nested there in the past, but now to be able to watch them was a thrill for everyone.
What is the largest food the great gray owl will take? Does food available play a role in the eggs laid?
The largest that they'll take, it's hard to say. There's always exceptions, but from time to time they probably take, birds the size of grouse, and then maybe mammals the size of hares, snowshoe hares, etc. And what role does food play? That's an important thing. The great gray owls here, we had a very severe winter, and yet those owls in our study site, the ones that you watched, were able to bring off 4 chicks up to a point here. We'll tell you about that. So that's a pretty good amount of an indication of a good amount of food, maybe a really good hunting area, and also perhaps the experience of the adults. But food is the major player in all of this. Um, so 4 chicks is a lot. I think I've heard of 5 before, but 4 chicks is a good indication of a lot of food and good parenting.
I think we saw a hawk arrive on the great horned owl nest one day. Do you think the nest belonged to the hawk? Will the hawk use it again after the great horned owl moves out?
Yeah, seeing a hawk at the great horned nest. That doesn't surprise me if the red tails haven't come back and inspected it. They did build the nest, and the red tails were on the nest just prior to launching the camera. And we thought, oh, we're going to have a red-tailed hawk nest this year. And then I went away for a couple of days and came back. When I left, the red-tail was on the nest. When I came back, the great horn was on the nest. But it is a red-tailed nest, and then they went a little bit to the east and reconstructed another nest over there.
Do great gray owls also hijack other birds' nests? If no, will the great grays use this nest next year?
Do the great grays hijack other birds' nests? Hijacking, I'm not sure if that's the word, but certainly they would use, because most owl species do not build nests. So if there were other nests built by, let's say, a red-tailed hawk, or in the forest where the great grays are, sometimes there's goshawk nests, sometimes there's raven nests, or maybe other accipiter nests. So they will use those, but they use them early enough in the season and before the hawks do that maybe they're not usurping a bird already on the nest. Now the snag that we're watching this year, that's something that is really a great gray owl type of nest. And so there's a good indication, we believe, that they'll use that again next year. This is the 3rd year in a row they've used this nest. And now we have a permanent camera on it, and hopefully we'll see the birds again next year. And maybe we'll start to see something a little earlier, and when they come back and check the nests out, and do they prep it beforehand? Are they starting to hang around? So we'll learn quite a bit more with this live camera.
Do you know if the pair of great horned owls we watched this season are a pair we have watched in prior years? If yes, which years?
Okay, the great horn's the same. It's always hard to say if they're the exact same individuals if they're not banded or marked in some way, like color banding or a tagile marker on the shoulder. But it is the same area, and let's see, 2 years ago we watched great horn's nest there, about 50 yards from this nest, except that they nested in a nest that was only 10 feet off the ground, and this nest here is 60-something feet off the ground.
Are there any plans to add any more cameras to the area to be able to extend the viewing area and the time of the owlets and family once they leave the nest?
Adding more cameras to the area. We'd love to add more cameras as long as the Explorer's on board with that. As far as adding cameras to track the birds once they leave the nest, that's really impossible to do. That's where the nesting season is really great, is it confines the birds to one spot in space and time for a certain period of time. But as far as to be able to monitor their movements, that would be impossible. But tell Explorer you love him. We'll get some more. We'll get some more cameras on some more owls.
What happened to our precious number 3 owlet after he or she was found?
Okay, precious number 3. It's really hard to say what happened. One of our colleagues was up there monitoring the nest and the chicks, and had actually seen number 3 the day before and photographed it. And then the next day, he found number 3 dead on the ground. I don't know what happens, and you got to be careful in speculating. There was a bear in the area, and the bird was very close to the ground and also walking around the ground and on stumps. The bear was seen the next day, and the owl was found the next day. The sequence is suggestive, but we just don't know. The fact that it wasn't eaten, and it was a healthy bird, it was a good a bird that should make it, in my opinion, indicates that maybe something happened. Maybe it got killed somehow.
Having the cams up for next season's great gray owls, will you leave the cameras on year-round?
We plan on having the camera up next year, and hopefully the birds choose the same nest. Will we leave them on year-round? That's up to Explore. So right now it's actually kind of cool, because every now and then the owls come back to the nest. So we're learning a little bit more about that. Even though they depart the nest at about 4 weeks of age, which you saw happen, to come back to the nest from time to time for whatever reason is interesting, and it provides us with new information. And I'm just learning a ton about great gray owls. I know a lot about other species, but the great grays are relatively new to us.
Will the Charlotte osprey chicks be banded this year?
Will the Charlotte osprey chicks be banded this year? I don't know. It's hard to say. We'd have to get a rig up there where we can actually platform and raise a platform up there where we could band the chicks. I would probably talk to my friend Rob Dominich, who runs Raptor View in Missoula and is head of the Osprey projects down there, and get his thoughts on. I'm not sure at the moment.
Will the great gray owl's parents or owlets stay in the area?
Will the great great parents or owlets stay in the area? Most likely, during the wintertime, they tend to move out a little bit more in search of food, but they probably have a general home range there that they stick pretty tight to. And given that we know that it's been 3 years in a row that they've nested there, they probably don't venture too far. But what I do find interesting is in all the great grays, now we have worked on great grays in the past, but not with the intensity that we're starting up this project with, is that very often we'll see pairs winter together, suggestive of the male and the female staying together throughout the winter, and then those pairs disappearing and moving back towards nesting areas. So I suspect that they will, as a pair.
Does casting pellets ever become a problem for owlets? This person watched one as it tried for a long time.
Yeah, casting pellets, it looks terrible, I have to admit it. I don't know if it's a problem, but it really looks like a lousy situation, and they, get that big mass of bone and fur and spit it up. I don't know, but I can relate the story on snowy owls. Norman Smith, who works on snowy owls at Logan Airport in Boston, found a dead snowy owl, and it had a pellet lodged in its throat, and somehow the bone protruded from the pellet. Normally they're wrapped in there, and stuck into the throat, and Norman believed that it maybe just choked.
Did the great gray owls nest in that same tree cavity last year?
Yeah, they nested there. So this is the third year in a row the great grays have nested in this snag.
What information did you acquire from your recent trip to Alaska to study the snowy owl? Is the snowy owl population rebounding?
Okay, my recent trip to Alaska to study snowy owls. Well, I want to tell you this. The great gray owls, we were trying to catch the female, and we had her in front of the net. All of a sudden, the sun came out, and it shone on the net, and the net appeared this silver wavy thing, and the female owl looked at the net, and I knew she saw it, and I made a quick move to try to flush her into it, and I tore my calf muscle. So I didn't make it to Alaska, and I'm rehabbing my calf muscle right now, but I do know in Alaska there's not a lot going on with the snowy owls. No one's found a nest yet, and that was about a week ago when I had talked to the people up there, and lemming populations were low. So it's still looking kind of bleak for the snowy owls in Alaska for the future.
What surprise or new information did you see with the great gray owl camera that you didn't have before this nest season?
I'm learning all kinds of things about owl behavior in general. It's not just great grays. I've studied long-eared for 30 years and snowies for 25 and many other species. And with the advent of these cameras, particularly what goes on at the nest, the female's interactions with the nesting environment, with her eggs, with her chicks, the male's responsibilities. So we're learning a ton about the behavior at the nest. And then the whole thing I mentioned earlier, the vocalizations. What do they all mean? The grunting by the female gray owl when she's doing something, in the nest with the chicks, and you hear those grunting vocalizations, and then those other high-pitched vocalizations. So we're learning a lot about that. And again, foraging behavior, how often does she take a break? How often does she move around? And we can quantify all that because Explore records all this. It's really neat to be able to watch them, and particularly in black and white at night with the infrared. There's so much to learn.
What is the single most important thing that individuals can do to help protect owls?
The most important thing you can do to help protect owls? Support the Owl Institute? How's that? Great ambassadors for protection of all kinds of environments, and just knowing a little bit more about the owls that live in the habitats or the neighborhoods perhaps where you live in, and maintaining things like snags, like the big snag the great grays in, or the cavities where the saw-whats in a little nest hole. One of the things that we do notice in our work in the forest is the lack of snags, or how that they're taken down for firewood or for safety concerns, etc. So maybe just a little awareness about the biology and the habitat requirements of the owls will lead someone maybe to present some information, challenge something where needed, or just be an advocate for the conservation of the habitats and nest characteristics.
What are your thoughts on human intervention in certain situations, especially since technology allows viewers to witness these events as they play out?
Yeah, human intervention in certain situations, good and bad. We've always felt that it was really important to share research with the public because we want public support, I mean, in the form of votes or money or just general appreciation of the owls. So that part is good. The other part sometimes, though, is during the course of doing research, and it's not just owls, but all wildlife researchers, you do things to the animals that it doesn't look great. And you might jump in the nest and grab those great gray owls, and their chicks are flapping around and they're biting at you, and they hate it, and you struggle with them. You got to be careful, but at the same time, you've got to show a little assertiveness, and so it doesn't look great. But when we band them and put them back in the nest and things like that, things are okay. So certain things you want to share with the public, and other things, unfortunately, you don't because it can be misinterpreted. Even though most researchers go through great lengths to protect the animals at the risk and ensure their safety.
Do you name or number the great gray owl offspring, and do you know how long the landowners have known about this?
Yeah, do we name? Yeah, we don't name them. I mean, Tommy and Eddie and Jill, Willie. No, we don't do that. Uh, I don't know why we don't, but we don't. They're number one, number two, number three, number four. I don't. That way you get too attached to them. If something happens to them, you might say, "Oh gosh, Tommy got killed by a bear." I mean, I don't know. We don't do that. But we do appreciate them. I mean, we've dedicated our lives to studying them. As far as the landowners go, they adore them. They just think it's the neatest thing going, and they love the fact that now that we're able to share our knowledge of the birds with them and all that.
Do owls and eagles get along, and who do you think would win in an adult fight?
Do owls and eagles get along, and who would win in a fight? An eagle's a pretty big bird of prey, a bald eagle and a golden eagle. Great horned owls have a lot of, they get a lot of moxie. They have been known, and right down the road here this year, we have a bald eagle nest, and when we did our surveys in March, there was a great horned owl in the nest, and nested and raised chicks. So you can interpret that the way you want. But eagles are big and tough. But great horned owls, at night they're pretty tough. And I don't know if you watched the osprey video. This osprey right here, off to my left on our yard. Well, when the male was sleeping, and you can see it in the night, and Catherine Green or one of the camera operators got a phenomenal sequence, and out of the shadows in the infrared in the dark of the night, you see a glow coming in the distance, and that glow gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's a great horned owl gliding in and whacks the male osprey in the back. They both go tumbling off the perch. Phenomenal events, but you've got to have a lot of guts to take on osprey, which is quite a bit bigger than the great horned owl.
Is it unusual for a research team to intervene with wildlife, as was done when the owlet fell out of this tree and was placed back with its family?
Yes, is it unusual for the research team to intervene? Yeah, I did place the owl back. And normally we don't do something like that, but my thoughts on it were it may have legitimately fell out of the nest, and I should have just left it alone because it jumped out of the nest the next day anyway. They all left the nest at about 27, 28, 29 days. So, yeah, I take responsibility for that. I probably should have just left it alone. But I was up there monitoring it and all that. We normally don't do things like that. Even when they're sick, we don't do things like that. We try to monitor their lives. And we're not there to make more of them. We're there to learn about them.
What type of information is gathered by the Owl Research Institute, and how is it used?
The type of information we gather, well, first of all, we're different than most. And I have to be careful here. We're different because we do long-term research. And I think that you need a minimum of 10 years, on any species. So we do long-term research, and we do it full-time. It's not like, go out in the summertime for a couple of weeks and collect data. So that's what's different about it. So we collect data, and again, you can use the great grays or the great horns, the long ears. The osprey we don't do really research on. And so we look at their survival, we look at their nest site characteristics, we look at their food habits, we look at their growth. There's all these kind of interesting questions that only people like myself and a few others in the world really care about, hormones and genetics and all that. But the overall picture is to, by doing the long-term studies, is to kind of look at their population, look at their habitat requirements, and then make that data available for conservation and management decisions. That's the important thing. The long-term monitoring is really, really important. And again, that's where we're different than most, the traditional homes of research, is we do long-term research. Our long-term owl study is 30 years going right now, or 31 actually. Our Snowy's 26 years going this year, and Boreal, Pygmy, Saw-Whet are all 20 or so years. Our smaller, what I call our younger adolescent studies, are 8 to 10 years. And the great gray owl study, now we've worked on great gray owls, but not with the intensity that we're starting now, and we're shooting for 10 years, at minimum, a minimum.
How long will the camera stay on this summer?
How long will the camera stay on? It's up to explore, until maybe it looks like the birds aren't there anymore. Yeah, and then I guess, I'll have conversations with the explore team, and then we'll make some decision on that. But right now, they seem to be coming back to the nest from time to time.
Did you enjoy your trip to Barrow last month?
Did I enjoy my trip to Barrow? I hate leaving Montana, but I do love it when I get to the snowy owls and the tundra and freeze my butt off. This is the first June, thanks to my cafetiere, that I've spent in Montana in 25 years, and I have to admit I'm kind of enjoying it.
Did you see any long-eared owls this season, and any that were likely last year's fledglings?
Okay, the long-eared owls this season, for those of you who might have seen, when I did this, chat a while back, we had a really severe winter, and we found dead owls, dead long-ears, dead short-ears in our study areas. But then we had a surge at the very end, a very late nesting going on. So we have some long-ears that are nesting right now, and short-ears, well, they're tailing off. But it was very, very late this year, but in very few nests. I can't tell you that we had any of the young from last year return to the area. The camera that we've had for the 4 years on the long-eared owls in one of our sites in Missoula was great. It was the same female for 4 years in a row. She had a different mating year, which was kind of interesting. And we banded all the chicks in each year, but we haven't gotten anything back, what you would call like, natal philopatria, one of them returning to the natal area to breed. So we haven't gotten any information from those nests, but overall with our long-eared owl project, yes, we've been able to provide data where both males and females that were born in the area sometimes return to the area.
Are the owlets hunting on their own yet?
Are the owlets hunting on their own yet? I'm assuming you're talking about the great grays and the great horns. Probably not. You can still hear them food begging. If you listen to the audio on the cameras at both sites, you'll hear them at night. These kind of screams, or something like that. I can't do it that well, but and those are food begging calls. So they're totally still dependent on their parents, and they're probably just right about at the fledgling stage now, where they're flying fairly well, but maybe not capable of hunting yet. And they'll bum as much food as they can right up until autumn. And then after that, it's hard to know the dynamics. Do the adults kick them out? You wake up one morning, your parents are gone? I mean, we don't know all that yet.
What type of agencies look at your data and or consult with you for policy making?
What kind of agencies? Well, you don't hear that much from the agencies. You hope that they're reading the literature and they're looking at some of your results. Now, locally here, yeah, I work closely with the Flathead Indian Reservation, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, private landowners, and a little bit with the state of Montana on trying to at least talk about management, I guess, would be the bigger issue here. Management of the landscape in relation to the owls. For example, you could look at the short-eared owls that nest in grasslands. And grasslands in an area like this are, they're used for farming, they're used for grazing, they're set aside for waterfowl production or pheasant production. So in the course of all that, there's actions that occur this field this year, and the next year you do that. Or we'll try to identify the field where there's activity. And so there's a variety of things that go on. On a local scale, we try to work together on. Sometimes it's difficult because everybody has different objectives, but I think for the most part we do okay.
What is your favorite fun fact about owls that most people don't know?
My fun fact about owls that most people don't know, I like everything about owls. I don't know. I mean, I just like the heck out of them. There's subtle things that why do pygmy owls have eye spots on the back of their heads? And why did that evolve? Why do long-eared short-eared owls have dark wrist marks here? Kind of things like that. You ask these questions, and I don't know if you want to say you hypothesize as to why, but you ask these questions and try to figure out methods of maybe getting to the answer if possible. But there's a lot. I mean, there's so much about owls I think is so unique. First of all, I would say they're, one of the most well-known group of animals in the world. And from a conservation perspective, if you have a landscape that you think needs protecting, find the owls that live there and use them as a poster child.
Did the Owl Research Institute retrieve the owlet and do a proper burial in the forest, or did you allow nature to take its course?
Okay, did we bury the owl that was found dead? No, we did not. We took the band off it and left it there. I hope that doesn't offend you. Sorry.
How are local pollutants, heavy metals, light, and noise pollution affecting the owls?
I don't know about pollutants affecting the owls, heavy metals, and noise. I don't know the answer to that. For the most part, owls have been a group that's not affected too much by some of the stuff that we put in the environment, particularly because they eat small mammals in particular, and a lot of these things don't accumulate small mammals like they do in birds or fish for fish eaters like the ospreys and the eagles. Noise pollutants, I can't tell you I don't know the answer to that either. How the owls do, sometimes when we're doing surveys and snowmobiling, and the snowmobiles are loud and dirty and all that stuff, and we get way up in the mountains, and you shut the snowmobile off, and there's a boreal owl calling right above your head. So you don't appear to be affected by it.
Okay, that seems like it's all the questions.
Okay. It sounds like that's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. If you can go to our website, theowlinstitute.org, and look at that. And yeah, hopefully it was worthwhile for all of you. And I guess we're signing off. That sound right? Okay. Thank you very much.